Welcome to the Parent Advocate Podcast, a show where we celebrate, defend, support, and uplift the voices of the LGBTQIA community. I'm your host, Stephen Chkumba. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I'm joined by my amazing co-host, Lisette Trujillo.
Hi everyone, Lisette here, she, her, Aya. The mission of the Parent Advocate Podcast is to elevate conversations and reframe narratives around trans and non-binary youth to help change hearts and minds. Each week, we bring you our take on all things happening from the perspective of two parents of BIPOC transgender kids.
Lisette, we need another catch-up episode because it has been literally over a month since we've been able to record and talk to one another.
That's right, Stephen. Life has been lifing, and every once in a while, we just need to pause, take stock of things, and also take care of the responsibilities we have when it comes to our other advocacy projects. So I can't wait to hear all about them.
You ain't said nothing but a word. Well, welcome everyone once again to the Parent Advocate Podcast. Let's get started. All right, Lisette, as I said at the beginning, we have been AWOL from this podcast for over a month. What has been going on?
Stephen, while we've been AWOL, we have been on our Substack game. I want to tell all of our listeners who love hearing our voices in this podcast format that they can also get a lot of up-to-date information from us around parenting transgender youth on each of our Substacks, that we make sure to maintain that weekly. We are dropping gems. And so follow us on Substack. I'm the mommy advocate, and Stephen?
I'm Stephen the dad.
So while we've taken a voice break, we have been writing like crazy. What's been going on with us? Well, it was Halloween weekend. Tomorrow, it will officially be 7 months since we moved.
Wow.
Which feels wild to me. I have homesickness, really bad in the last few weeks. And then one other parent that moved to Latino America was like, yeah, that 6th month is when people kind of hit that wall, and it's really normal. So I'm glad that I'm just not finding my way, and that this is normal time for that homesickness to really kind of set in. Daniel is doing amazing. He's in his senior year. His classes are going well. On Friday, they did senior sunrise. And so I went with him because it was really early, and we watched the sunrise from the Mediterranean. It was really beautiful. And, this is exciting. My baby sister and her wife are having twins.
What? Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you. I'm so excited. And I think that was part of the homesickness, is that I'm not going to be home to do all the things with them. And I'm just really sad about it. But now I will have 4 nieces and nephews. And it's on my side. On Jose's side, I have a lot of nieces and nephews.
I'm sure.
But yeah, life is good. We're moving along. Now, you're the one who's been on a whirlwind. Teffy was talking about you. You were on tons of panels. I want to know it all.
Okay, where to start? Well, I'm going to start at the beginning, which is the No Kings rally.
Okay.
Now, I have received the memo that we Black and brown people can take a break. We can sit these ones out because we had been yelling from the mountaintops about what was coming, and it just seemed that nobody was listening to us. And so we hit pause on all kinds of activism and advocacy and movement because it seemed like our efforts weren't being appreciated. But now that everyone has gotten the memo, they're all hitting the streets and doing everything they can to fight back against this gargantuan machine that has been gaining momentum and steamrolling over people's rights since this dude got into office. And it's now that they're starting to recognize that if we don't have this all hands on deck approach, we are going to be ass out sooner rather than later. And again, late to the party, but they're finally here. And so Nicole convinced me that we should go to this No Kings rally and let our voices be heard and let our presence be seen, because otherwise it had just been this lily white event. And so we brought a little saison, a little color, a little adobo to the No Kings rally. And that's the thing that started me feeling like, okay, it's time for us to get really deep in this work. And then I was invited to participate in a day of unreasonable conversation. Now, for those who don't know what this is. It is a recurring conversation organized by Kerry Washington and a group of other Hollywood executives to call attention to some of the more uncomfortable conversations we're not having in public so that we can have them and really come to some conclusions about what we can do. It's an opportunity for movers and shakers across various industries and walks of life to come to Hollywood and essentially talk to the 600 plus creatives, story writers, executives who are responsible for 75% of what we see on television and in film and in digital media, to hear from voices they traditionally don't hear from about things that you traditionally do not see incorporated into film, television, and the stories that we see that really inform the public consciousness. And so Wayne Maines, myself, a woman from Dragon Moms, a former Mormon, a mother whose child shared their identity with them and essentially was excommunicated from the church and excommunicated from their family because she chose to support her child, were on stage being interviewed by Nicole Maines, who was the moderator for our session. And in a day of amazing conversations with people like Aaron Parnas and Vice President Kamala Harris, we took the stage and talked about what it was to be the parents of gender expansive children. And literally, Lisette, when I tell you all day long, I've been listening to amazing conversations and people really been moved and engaged by some of these conversations. But our session was the one where the applause was the loudest, where the tears were flowing, where people were really moved by what they heard, because I don't think people traditionally hear from parents like us about what it is that we go through, especially today. So that was really moving. And 2 weeks after that, I was back in LA for another conversation with Bobby Jones, who runs this organization called GoodCon. And the session was GoodCon LA. And we were invited to be a part of a session because Elevate Prize Foundation, the organization that gave us $250,000 to finish the film, has also supported all of these other amazing activists, filmmakers, movers and shakers doing amazing things. And that session was an opportunity for Elevate to talk about the two projects they were working on, our film and another film that was about competitive garbage pickup.
Wow.
It's like an Olympic sport in Japan. So we were on stage, and once again, I had an opportunity to talk about what we were doing with the dads. And at one point, he asked me to talk about our film, and we had sent in like different images of the dads that were in the film, different screen grabs from the film itself. And I had a chance to talk about Ryan and Ryan's son. Ryan had top surgery for the first time, went swimming topless in the ocean with his dad. And I talked about the Dumonts, Andy and Violet, and how Violet at 11 was running her parents ragged by being unapologetic about who she was and expecting everyone who interacted with her to fall in line. About Ed and Charlie, who, to protect his child, moved his family from San Antonio, Texas to British Victoria, Canada. About, me and Hobbs, this 19-year-old who forced me to become the advocate that I am, because I recognize that the way LGBTQ plus people are treated in this country, the way Black and brown trans people especially are treated in this country, is abysmal. And there's no way I could conscientiously parent him without helping to protect other people just like him. So it was an amazing set of conversations that I've had. These panels that I've had have really given me so much inspiration. But wait, there's more. The Monday I got back from LA, we get an email from the Envision Impact Lab grant committee that told us we had just won their grant for $200,000 to put on an impact campaign to accompany our film. And we had proposed a 12-month campaign that would go from one part of the country to the other, screening the film, working with local LGBTQ plus organizations, working with fatherhood groups, doing non-traditional things. Like most impact things around films are screen the film and then do a Q&A with the showrunner or the director or the cast. And like, we're not doing that. Well, we may do some of that at the film festivals, but we're also going directly into the communities. We're partnering with local community organizations. We've already partnered with the Alley 40 Center, which is a 24-hour LGBTQ plus resource center. So if you are a young LGBTQ plus person who gets kicked out of their house because of how they identify or who they love, the Alley 40 Center will take you in. Not only will they give you a bed, 3 square meals, they'll also give you access to healthcare. If you need PrEP, if you need medication, if you need mental health therapy, they do job training. They help people get their documentation. Like, it is a wraparound organization. And this is an organization that's partnering us for our impact campaign. And so it's like so many things. Okay. And I'm going to say this one last thing, and then we're going to, because we got a whole show to talk about. But the last thing that has happened since we've spoken is that we've finally completed our film. We've submitted it for South by Southwest and Sundance. Both of those films are formally in and being considered by their programming committees. And, knock on wood, we will be in both of those film festivals come top of the year. So I believe in speaking things into existence. And so I'm manifesting both of those results. We're going to be premiering at Sundance, and we're going to bring our feature length film to the same festival, South by Southwest, that premiered the Dad's short. So,
yay! Well,
yeah.
first off, I still need you to send our releases, but I feel like you have our word already.
Yes.
But second of all, we're not going to ever be able to go to any of these events because we are across the pond. Are we going to be able to watch?
So we have international festivals as well. So we're trying to come to Cannes, we're trying to come to Venice, we're trying to come to Spain, we're trying to come to Portugal, we're trying to come to a bunch of non-American cities with the film. So you will see us, you will be part of the festival, and stop playing with me.
I just want to see it. I want to watch. How do you feel? Like it's been birthed?
I
Would
feel amazing.
Yeah.
Lisette, I feel amazing. I feel so good about this film. One of the things that I have noticed, because this whole year we've been screening the short and we've been screening the trailer and we've screened a scene with Ed and Charlie. And so we've been able to do some focus group stuff with the fundraisers that we've been putting on in different cities across the United States. And every single time we show those clips, those pieces, the response is overwhelmingly positive. People want to know more. People feel compelled to do more. People have given us their money. At a time when nonprofits are struggling to get funding, people have been going out of their way to support this film and this project and this foundation. And so I feel like if that's the result from these insular little spots, that's going to be the result when it's finally released to the masses.
Amazing. Congratulations.
Congratulations to all of you in the film. Stop playing.
I know, but you made this happen. You were like, hey,
Facts.
everybody, we're going to make a foundation. And all the dads are like, okay, but you were the driving force.
Facts and more facts. But we could talk on and on and on about what I've been getting into. But how about we get to today's topics?
Let's do it. Let's talk about the thing that's pissed me off the most this week.
Let's.
Okay, we're going to start with Democratic strategists throwing trans people under the bus again. David Axelrod, James Carville, and David Plouffe, who are all aligned in dispensing with valuable communities to appear more like Republicans on identity and cultural issues.
Lisette, when I tell you that I was so fucking pissed when I heard that shit, I was so fucking pissed when I heard that shit.
They're like, let's just mimic fascism. Light.
But I mean, to what end? It's not like people are buying it. And the problem is when we act like their tact is working, we give legitimacy to it. As opposed to being like, trans people aren't causing your groceries to be expensive. Trans people aren't causing your SNAP benefits to go away. Trans people aren't causing your gas prices to be high. Trans people aren't entering another war. Trans people aren't killing people in international waters. Trans people aren't sending $20 billion a year to Israel. Trans people are not putting National Guards into your city. Trans people aren't doing any of the things that are actually causing Americans discomfort and pain. And for some reason, these Democratic strategists think that throwing trans people under the bus is the way to go to be more like Republicans. Why the fuck would we want to be more like Republicans?
But Stephen, this is not new. So on my Substack, I shared kind of a piece that I wrote about Ezra Klein and Ta-Nehisi Coates, right? And in the Substack essay, I didn't say like they just reinforce white supremacy because I feel like that was a given. Anyone who watched that interview knew what that was. Like we don't have to preface that. We know. But what I was trying to emphasize is the fact that regardless of whether the people who are working with our elected officials are people of color or not, the strategy is always that of being moderate and saying that just a certain part of the population will never vote. And so because they'll never vote, why bother, right? And so this idea that like you pander to moderate conservative people in order to win is nothing genius. It's nothing revolutionary. It's not new. It's politics as usual. The one thing that I told Kristen Sinema's staffer, which I shared in my essay, when I was like, hey, you really need to focus on Black and Latino communities. You know, the Stephen Millers of the world are spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to market to them misinformation. And I was told, there's just always going to be a segment of the population that won't vote. So like we're not gonna bother. And I was like, they don't not vote. They're disenfranchised from voting. And we can see that with what happened in Texas, right?
Absolutely.
And redistricting. And so this idea that people are more conservative than we believe, and so that's why we're losing elections, is more about disenfranchisement and not actually meeting your voters or caring about the communities that are being left behind.
Absolutely. And it's interesting because what happened in the last election was that the Republicans did a particularly good job about targeting those disenfranchised voters. They had messages in Spanish, they had messages delivered by people who were cultural representatives in those spaces that had legitimacy and agency in those spaces so that those messages, those campaigns of disinformation were successful because you saw great numbers of those voters who traditionally don't vote voting and voting for them. And so it's not like they're not reachable. It's not like they don't vote. It's that you didn't take the time to focus on them such that they were not ripe to be poached by the other side. And if they do that again, the same thing's going to happen. We're relying too much on people being hurt by the policies of the right. Those same people voted against their own interests, notwithstanding being told unequivocally Project 2025 is going to fuck you in the butt, and not in a good way if you don't like that stuff. And still people voted against their own interests.
And it's a double-edged sword, right? Because you have Republicans saying, be afraid of trans people, be afraid of like what is happening with the wokeness and all this stuff, and like trans people, be afraid, so vote our way. And Democrats are like, yeah, no, we doing the same thing, but saying like, oh, it's the white voter that we're not able to capture, the white moderate. And so let's capture them instead of being like, you know what, you've been misinformed. And Republican, think tanks like America First Legal are funding campaigns that are anti-immigrant while also funding anti-LGBTQ campaigns, harming you on both ends.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to say this one thing and we can move on because we could talk about this particular thing all day. But I'm always going to question advice that's coming from old white men because those are the people who got us here. Let's be 100% clear about how we got here is listening to white men tell us what is and isn't going to happen and being wrong time and time again. And so here we are once again, a bunch of pontificating blowtards telling us what is and isn't going to work for the Democratic Party. And once again, steering us in a direction that's going to leave vulnerable, marginalized, at-risk people further vulnerable, marginalized, and at risk. And I'm saying, fuck them.
And not just marginalized people, but even those of us of color who have privilege, who understand policy. At some point, we too will be disenfranchised by their belief that even our votes don't matter.
Yeah, fuck them all. But listen, I can do you one better.
Okay.
Under a new health proposal leaked to the press, the Trump administration is planning to heavily restrict access to gender-affirming care for trans youth across the country. The new proposals, which have been put forth by the Department of Health and Human Services, would prohibit federal Medicaid reimbursement for trans patients under the age of 18 and also block all Medicaid and Medicare funding for services at hospitals which provide gender-affirming care to young trans people across the country.
Stephen, this one's hard because we know that gender-affirming care
saves lives
and had a material impact on our own children's lives. And let's face it, I've had gender-affirming care when it comes to like my healthcare needs. Anything that is gendered is gender-affirming care, from Botox to my yearly women's wellness checkups.
To my vasectomy.
Right. And so this continued push to further harm trans people from having access to appropriate private medical care is just frustrating.
And again, I'm going to ask people to really pay attention to what's going on. Of all the things that are going on in this country today, of all the things that are happening, we're seeing Brooklyn flooded every single time it rains. We're seeing people literally unable to afford food. We're seeing cataclysmic climate things happening in countless states across this country. And somehow the administration's highest priority is taking away healthcare from what is less than 1% of the population. To what end? What are we accomplishing with this campaign of terror against this one group of people?
Oh my God, Stephen. And did you look at what was on the USDA website on Thursday and Friday? Did you miss this?
Wait, what did they do? There's so much going on. It's sometimes hard to keep track.
So, continuing on with our conversation about the way trans people are being scapegoated and used as political pawns, the USDA posted on their official website a statement stating Senate Democrats have now voted 12 times to not fund the food stamp program, also known as the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program, SNAP. Bottom line, the well has run dry. At this time, there are no benefits issued November 1st. We're approaching an inflection point for Senate Democrats. They can continue to hold out for health care for illegal aliens and gender mutilation procedures, or reopen the government so mothers, babies, and the most vulnerable among us can receive critical nutrition assistance.
Lisette, can you say violation of the Hatch Act? Since when are government agencies allowed to engage in partisan rhetoric on federal sites? When has that ever been legal? When has that ever been a thing you can do? We have laws to prevent this kind of stuff. And the last time I checked, Republicans controlled both the House and the Senate and the executive branch, and damn near 6 of the 9 justices in the judicial branch. So how are they forming their lips to say the Democrats are doing anything?
Exactly, Stephen. And not only that, but what commentary like this is so dangerous. It further puts a target on our trans loved ones, our children, our friends, and it's part of that disinformation machine that continues to blame trans people for the economic harms that this administration is causing.
Not only that, Lisette, but with the uptick in actual political violence, it's also putting a target on the backs of congressional Democrats who are now being accused of preventing regular, everyday, hardworking Americans from accessing benefits that, again, so that we're abundantly clear, are already paid for. The Trump administration is stopping payments for something that not only is there enough money to fund, to provide ongoing care, notwithstanding the shutdown, but there is a actual law in place that says even in the event of a shutdown, those funds should not be interrupted. So people need to be abundantly clear that nothing that this website says, nothing that Republicans are saying is true. The truth of the matter is they are doing this specifically to foment anger and to create chaos such that they can push an agenda, which most people are not paying attention to, but involves the use of military, martial law, and keeping this nigga in office as long as possible. That's what's really happening.
And they're going to keep scapegoating gender affirming care because people are so misinformed and willing to prohibit trans people from accessing care that they deserve and should have, just like we all should have access to care, over and over again so that they can harm all of us through misdirection and misinformation.
Facts.
But Stephen, we also have to talk about this other bullshit that happened, which was when young Republicans were exposed as racist, misogynistic, and homophobic in text messages they shared, which were recently leaked. Instead of condemning the post, the Republican Party dismissed it as locker room talk, just like they did the candidate Trump, who said that he was gonna grab them by the blup. These are 30-year-old people that JD Vance referred to as children. These are just kids making bad jokes.
But isn't that always the way? Once again, isn't that always the way? If young Democrats had been engaged in this exact same behavior, they would have called for their heads. They would have caused for them to be excommunicated, for them to be stripped of any positions, for them to be basically excoriated publicly. But for some reason, when Republicans do wrong, when they act bad, when they show themselves to be hateful curs, instead of actually holding them to account and saying that thing was wrong, they dismiss it. Oh, it's just locker room talk. Locker room talk, which ends up having the highest office in the land occupied by a rapist, by a person who has been found liable for sexual assault in a court of law.
And the racism alone, Stephen. Like, it's 2025, and we shouldn't be making excuses for the horrible things that they were saying. And some of those people were from Arizona.
Yes, they were.
And
New York and Kansas.
Double down on their hate rhetoric. And sometimes it makes me lose hope in humanity, but I have to remember that there's more good in us than those people.
So I'm going to just call it like I see it. Some white people are holding on for dear life to this fantasy past of white supremacy and superiority. It's all they have. Because if you look at the particular people that were engaged in this chat thread, calling people monkeys and all kinds of horrible things, when you look at them, these are not people who should be holding on to some Aryan fantasy. They don't represent any of that. They probably wouldn't be the prom king. They probably wouldn't be the example of athleticism. They're not the heartthrobs that everyone is looking for. That's why they have to talk about rape in such jovial and joking terms, because that's probably the only way any woman would be with them, against their will and without their consent. But once again, instead of condemning the behavior, they double down and act like it's cool. Germans don't allow you to have swastikas and to raise Nazism as a positive thing. Why are we Americans who know the history of the Nazi party holding it up as something to aspire to? Why are we acting like gassing people was a fun and or funny thing to do? Why are we acting like harming people is the way to go, is the way to lead an organization? Like, if these are young Republicans, if this is the future of the Republican Party, I can understand why you won't have hope, why you don't have hope in humanity, because people like this are out there aspiring to be leaders of their constituents. Like, can you imagine?
All right, Stephen. I don't have any words.
This is such a downer of an episode.
It's just the ugliness of humanity.
Yeah.
Like violent people willing and hoping to do harm in like a joyful, gleeful way. Like, how do you wake up in the morning?
I don't know. I'm not like that. And I don't even consort with people who are like that.
No.
So I can't tell you how people like that live with themselves. I wouldn't be able to, certainly.
No, never.
So let's end on a happy note.
Okay.
Now it's time for our recurring segment, Allies and Assholes, where we highlight individuals and groups who are supporting the LGBTQI community on the one hand and calling out straight up assholes who are trying to move us all backwards on the next. Lisette, who are we talking about today?
Oh, Stephen. Our ally of the week is none other than the Godfather's dad, the great actor, Robert De Niro. You're probably wondering why we picked Robert De Niro this week. Is it because of his steadfast opposition to the fascists in the White House? Under normal circumstances, that would be good enough. But this week, it's because of his steadfast and unwavering support of his trans daughter, Erin. Stephen, Robert De Niro is a dad.
Dude, you have to understand that when I saw that, I was like, oh my goodness, do we think we could get Robert De Niro to come to one of our retreats? That would be amazing. Now, mind you, Erin just shared her identity with her father this year after speaking to a magazine about her transition. And shortly after, Robert De Niro aired his unwavering support to the Hollywood Reporter, saying he loves and supports his daughter. That's how dads show up.
That's right. Stephen, you can manifest Robert De Niro, and I will manifest a best friendship with Sade. Because really, you know, they can make a movie. She can make a song for the movie. You know what I mean? Like, let's manifest these things in our lives. We're in good company. Also, as we're manifesting, I just want to say that this is really important, because in a time like this, when so many so-called allies are turning tail and running away from trans people, it's nice to see this public figure showing up for their child and standing up for their child in the most beautiful way. And that is why Icon Robert De Niro is our ally of the week.
Congratulations to Icon and hopefully new member of the Dads Foundation, Robert De Niro. Now on to our asshole of the week.
All right, Stephen, let's do it.
Our asshole of the week is J.K. Rowling. Avowed TERF and notorious transphobe J.K. Rowling made news again, and not for a wildly successful fiction novel or an action adventure series. No, once again, she's out in the world being her mean-spirited, ugly, small self. You see, this week, Glamour UK released an issue of its magazine honoring trans women doing amazing things in various fields on their cover. And of course, J.K. Rowling could not let it stand.
That's right, Stephen. The cover story celebrates the magazine's annual Women of the Year Awards, which it says, shine a light on the importance of celebrating sisterhood and solidarity during a particularly fraught year for women's rights.
Think about that. The magazine said we are going to stand in solidarity, in sisterhood solidarity with women who have been essentially pilloried this entire year, who've been the butt of jokes, who've been the butt of harmful rhetorics, who've been the victims of anti-trans legislation across the world. But of course, she couldn't let it stand. She can't do anything but be hateful and say that she is not down with these air quotes men on the cover. Instead of keeping her mouth shut and doing like her parents said, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything at all, she's got to open her ugly, disparaging mouth and say ugly, disparaging things. And this is why J.K. Rowling is our asshole of the week. Well, that's our show for today, folks. I want to thank my co-host Lisette Trujillo for bringing the real to these airwaves.
And Stephen, I want to say thank you for being an incredible dad, for doing everything that you're doing to make the world better for our kids, and for continuing to do it back home where we so desperately need to see parents standing up for their kids. We couldn't do this without you, and obviously we couldn't do this without our listeners.
And folks, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and Substacks, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and do whatever you've got to do to stay up to date with everything going on here at the Parent Advocate Podcast.
Bye.
Bye.